Hi, church. Welcome to today's digital devotion. So, as you know, we've started a new sermon series called Mind the Gap. And in it, we are looking at scripture passages in which there is a plot hole, or there's a gap in the story, or there's just something about the narrative that isn't finished. And instead of just ignoring that or glossing over that, we're taking some time to delve into that, look at the context, think about why the scripture writers might have left it that way, or what we can make of that gap. And it's just a good time for us to reflect on our tradition's view of scripture, which is that we take scripture so seriously. In fact, we take it so seriously that we don't take it literally. We take scripture for what it is. It is a collection of letters and poems and narratives and fictional stories and eyewitness accounts that are all combined together into a little library called the Bible. And so we're taking time to look at each of these texts in the way that we believe the original authors intended them to be looked at or to be preserved, and wrestling with some gaps, some holes that we find.
Yeah, and actually the process of looking at these gaps, of trying to figure out what's going on with the plot holes or why certain information is not provided, that work is part of interpreting scripture. It's such a misconception to think that we can pick up the Bible as a document, and when we read a passage, there's one interpretation or one way to understand it, and we're trying to drill down and find that one interpretation if we're careful enough and do the right work or understand the passage correctly, then we'll get that. Part of the process of understanding scripture is discussing it, talking about the gaps, talking about how we feel about it, how we understand it, how we read it. That brings the text to life because the Bible is a living document. It is speaking to us today. And so how we bring everything that we are, everything that we've experienced, what's going on in the world today, when we bring all of that to the process of interpretation, that helps us get to a meaning that is relevant for us in our context. And so this discussion, what we're doing on Sundays together, that's part of extracting the meaning from the text. It's part of the interpretive process and a very important part of it.
Yeah. And I'll just say that one thing that always drove me nuts when I was growing up, when I was in college, and I was kind of looking around at different churches and trying to figure out how other traditions worship, one thing that always drove me nuts in a church is when the pastor would cherry pick verses from different books in the Bible in the same sermon and sort of try to combine them into some overarching message. And I would always think to myself, that doesn't make any sense. You can't combine 2 verses from Genesis with 3 verses from Deuteronomy with 2 verses from Corinthians and a verse from Matthew and then try and make a message out of that. That doesn't make any sense. I would never try and communicate a feeling to someone by saying, well, in this letter I wrote to this person 10 years ago, and in this poem that I composed 6 months ago, and in this novel that I wrote 2 years ago, and like, this is what I'm trying to say. Like, each document is its own thing. And so we're trying to delve deeper into each one, take our time with it, and talk about why it is written the way it is. I think we're doing it a great service by doing
the Bible a good service. Yeah,
work.
Holy, faithful interpretation, definitely. And it allows us to have different ideas about the text, and that's a good thing. And so we will mind the gaps this Sunday. You gotta say it with a British accent.
Mind the gaps.
All right.
My British accent could use some work.
So we will mind the gaps this Sunday. Mind the gap. We will do some good interpretive work with you on Sunday. We'll see you then.
We'll see you then.